Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. We do this live show, and I normally have a great panel, and I've got a great panel now. One of them's going to be coming back. His computer's just got too hot for him to handle, but that was Chris. He's coming back, though, folks. But I'm going to introduce you to my panel that we got at the present moment, and let's start with Sally. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I build custom Genesis sites for growing businesses and nonprofits, and I'm also really busy with arranging the WordPress 15th birthday party for our meetup on Sunday.
Fantastic. And I've got my great friend John Locke. Would you like to introduce yourself, John?
Sure thing. My name's John Locke. Do SEO for manufacturing and industrial firms.
That's great. And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a support, maintenance and development company with a speciality in learning management systems and membership websites. Before we go into the show, we've got some great stories to discuss in this show. It is Memorial Weekend in America. Some of our regular panelists have gone off. They're roaming somewhere in the countryside somewhere. But before we go into the stories, I want to talk about one of our great sponsors, and that is Kinsta Hosting. Kinsta Hosting is a specialized WordPress hosting company, i.e. they only host WordPress websites, so they really know what they're doing. Big enough, small enough to really still care, big enough to have all the technology that you require, like staging sites, the latest version, if you want it, of PHP 7.2. Why should you care if you're not a developer? It will make your website extremely faster. We host the WP-Tonic website with them. It's just been fantastic experience. Their technical support, their support team, like I say, just the quality of hosting, cannot speak more highly of them. If that sounds of interest to you or some of your maybe clients, go to the WP-Tonic website. There's banners on, there will be banners on the post linked to this particular show and all over the website, and you click one of those, you'll be helping the show. They are affiliate links, and if you buy through that affiliate link, you'll be helping the show and Kinsta. So let's go straight into it. Panel. Yes, no one's ready for GDPR. Yes, what do you reckon, Sally?
I reckon that's true. I mean, and it's not that surprising that no one in the States is ready for it, because it didn't get to be, particularly prominent news until a couple of months ago. But I understand there are a lot of businesses actually in the EU that are not ready for it, and very likely that even if they've been getting ready for it since this law was passed in 2016, are not completely compliant yet. And I have 3 clients who work with customers from the EU, and one that actually has offices in the EU. And they get in touch with me yesterday and said, "Here, you need to put up this cookie policy by tomorrow." And it has to list all of our cookies. Well, I've been working on that, so it's coming along. But I'm not completely ready, and nobody's completely ready. But I'm sure everyone has been receiving tons of emails talking about their new privacy policy and re-opting into their email newsletters and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I wondered why. And then this article came across my radar, and it explains the reason why quite clearly, I'd say, is that the regulations are unfathomable to some extent. Right. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, I think a lot of regular businesses, this might not even be on the radar. They might be getting a lot of we've updated our privacy policy emails this week, and I think a lot of people are probably wondering what that even is. So I would say that there's a lot of people not ready for GDPR in the US, probably in the EU. I mean, they're probably a little bit more on top of it, but and like you said, it's a large document. A lot of people probably don't, understand the implications of it. What I've seen a lot of people doing this week is if you were subscribed to their email newsletter, they just said, if you want to keep receiving this, click a button and opt in again. And I think if not, they're just, deleting anybody that doesn't do that, and just as a means of making sure that everybody's opted into communications. So
I got one of those emails from Chris here,
Yes.
who maybe he can tell us about the fun that Lifter LMS has been having with GDPR.
Yes, Chris has joined us, a regular of our panel. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself, Chris, to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. I'm Chris Badgett, the co-founder of Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress-based system for creating, selling, and protecting online courses.
That's
And
great. I'm sorry to interrupt. He's also a sponsor of this great podcast as well. Much appreciated. Has your computer cooled down now, Chris?
It has.
How nice. How nice. So would you like to tell us of how you've been dealing with this particular issue?
Absolutely. So Lifter LMS was one of the 15 first plugins in the WordPress repository to hook into the core WordPress functions that were put in place for GDPR. So we've given course creators, membership site owners that have courses, the tools to be GDPR compliant in terms of the right for people to request their data and the right for erasure or the right to disappear. And we've also, as a company doing business online that does a lot of marketing and collects personal data, e-commerce data, just lots of data around all kinds of different touch points with the online business. We've updated our privacy policy. We spent a lot of time looking at the Automatics privacy policy, which they have open sourced. I'd encourage anybody to check that out, and we give them credit in our privacy policy. So it's a combination of two things for us with GDPR. As our own online business, we've added explicit consent and link to our updated privacy policy when people buy software products through us, through our WooCommerce store. And then the people using our tool to make their own online businesses around courses and coaching and things of that nature, they have a set of tools to give people the data privacy and freedoms and explicit consent requirements that GDPR allows. So for us, it was a lot of work. We got it done on time, and we're moving on.
Woot.
5 stars. Gunny, when it comes to requesting, obviously requesting what data somebody has and having the ability to delete it, but when it comes to actually email lists and asking, are there any insights or tips that you would like to give to the audience that what they should be concerned about around these new regulations, Chris?
Yes. The first thing is it's not 100% perfect system. So nobody's going to, be 100% compliant. One of the things, and by the way, we had somebody from XWP over, and we did a hour-long webinar with that person who is a GDPR expert contributing to core WordPress around this issue. So we have a webinar available. If you go to lifterlms.com, go to the bottom of the website, click on webinars, and you can find that, where we presented in great detail what GDPR is and showed the features that Lifter LMS can do to handle that. But some of the biggest takeaways for the online business owner who's building an email list is that there is the concept of being a controller of data and a processor of data. So my website, I am a controller of data for my online business. I may then be passing that user's email address and name to my email marketing platform. So if somebody requests erasure, they need to first be able to do that. And then you need to be able to basically have the tools available to either erase them off your site completely. Then you take the second step, go over to your MailChimp, your ActiveCampaign, whatever it is, erase them out of there. If they want data export, you need to have tools and the availability to do that. And then the other main one is just getting that explicit consent when they do opt in, that what you are going to be doing with their data and what type of data you're collecting. I think a classic example of this is people have something called lead magnets. where they, ask for an email address in exchange from a guide, which is great. That's great content marketing. But what they're actually doing is giving them the guide and then putting them on a sequence where they're going to get 100 emails spread out over a year. If you're not letting them know that you're going to be emailing them more than just the download, that's an example of where going forward, we need to be a little bit more open and honest of what we're doing with people's emails and our plans to what to do with their data.
Yeah, this controller, what's the two terms again? The controller and
processor.
The controller and processor. That's the area where I think it's losing a lot of people, isn't it, Chris?
It is, and there's a gray area of which I can highlight. Stripe, for example, or PayPal is processing e-commerce data, right?
Yeah.
It would totally mess up your accounting if Stripe gave you the tools to like completely delete this person's like who spent money with you. That's not really cool. You don't want to do that. And you need to have a record of that for financial purposes. And there's financial laws around that. So some things, can be deleted. Some things can become anonymized. And sometimes you do, in fact, need to hang on to their data to be in compliance with certain financial laws and things of that nature. So that's where it gets a little fuzzy. But if we just focus on the low-hanging fruit of having a strong privacy policy, being really direct about what we're collecting and why, and giving people the ability to take whatever they have on your site with them and then delete appropriately, that's what it's all about. Nobody's going to be perfect, but just make strides in that direction.
That's great. Thanks for that, Chris. I think we've covered this story quite effectively. And thank you for your contribution, Chris. It's much appreciated. I think we go on to the next story. But like I say, I think Chris, just to summarise, it seems like, well, it is. Chris has got some great resources, especially this webinar. If you want to delve more into this, I would suggest you go to Chris's website, watch that webinar. I'm going to. And hopefully over the coming weeks, we will clarify the situation for you even more. So on to the next story, and that's kind of WordPress story. Why sites didn't automatically update to WordPress 4.96. Sally, would you like to?
Yes, certainly. I had lots of sites that did, in fact, update automatically to WordPress 4.9.6, but this apparently caused a number of things to break, and then we got some articles posted about, this is really a major release because of the blah, 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 and so after all of that, it says, here, it turns out that the WordPress development team disabled the auto update system after discovering that a few plugins were incorrectly loading the new privacy features and triggering fatal 500 errors on the front end of user sites, which you can imagine would upset people a little. So then they stopped the automatic updates, and we're planning to get a 4.9.7 fix for that. And I've been mentally envisioning that we're going to be up to 4.999 before we get to 5.0 because of the insistence of tying that to Gutenberg. But
which I don't think was a great idea, really, was it?
Well, the thing is that you cannot be with something as massive as Gutenberg. It's really hard to predict when it's going to be done. And if you're not going to release it until it's done, which I would advise, then, there's other things that come up, and getting the privacy stuff in there was very important and, connected to a deadline. But version numbers aside, it is difficult to test something with every plugin that's out there, but it appears to have been enough plugins that had this issue that they needed to roll it back. If it was 2 or 3 people with an obscure plugin on their site, they would say, well, that's your problem. But clearly there's an issue actually in the WordPress code, and it makes sense to back off from the update.
Yeah, I can say hand on heart that we didn't have one incident of any trouble updating.
Yeah, I
the
don't think
stuff
any
that-
of my clients' sites or mine's had any issues.
No, we didn't either. But we switch off automatic major all security because we update practically all the time for our clients, but we want control over that. John, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't have any issues either updating people to 496. But I think this illustrates a point, in that is that anytime somebody touches WordPress, no matter what the point of failure is, whether it's WordPress itself, a theme, a plugin, or some other thing, WordPress is going to be what people point the finger at. I understand like why they have this set up the way that it is. And normally, and for, people listening at home that don't, normally understand this, these minor point releases where it's, 3 numbers, they're considered minor releases, and most of the managed WordPress hosting companies will update automatically. But because of all the GDPR stuff and that it was put into this, a lot of plugin developers, I'm sure, were in a rush to, test that and make sure that everything worked correctly. Knock on wood, we were very lucky. So I guess, the stuff that we're building with is good. And again, there's another reason to, work with tools like plugins or themes that are from people who are deeply involved in the WordPress community and following what's going on. So there you go.
Thanks for that. Any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, just to echo what John's saying, just always use a staging environment when updating. And yeah, that's no additional thoughts. And just I would just want to add for the listener, just to make sure they're aware of what that privacy feature was that is in the WordPress core. WordPress itself kind of gave you a starter privacy policy page that you could build on top of, which is it's something that people wanted to, no, we're not lawyers, and the WordPress and the plugins that hook into this aren't trying to give you legal advice, but there was a huge pain point where people didn't know how to even get started with their privacy policy. And maybe they're a bootstrapped entrepreneur without a lot of money or a legal team or whatever, which is most of us. And so I thought it was really cool that they put that, starter privacy policy page in there. And at Lifter LMS, for example, we actually hook into that and go ahead and fill out in that privacy policy all the different types of data you're collecting because of us, so that you can be transparent about that. But I guess some plugins had some kind of relationship to privacy pages or something that caused a conflict. It sounds like just a natural common WordPress kind of conflict scenario.
Yeah, certainly does. I think we covered that. Let's go for our final story for this part of the show, and then the other stories for part 2. Adobe requires Magento commas. What do you reckon about this one, Sally? What do you think of this one?
Right. Well, I didn't see it coming. And not that I've been paying that much attention, but I know that, Adobe is moving into more, they're spreading their empire. For instance, they just made Adobe XD, the kind of mock-up and prototyping tool, free, which is nice.
For the time being.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But they had been they had a free kind of beta version out, and then you were supposed to pay for it, so I uninstalled it because I pay Adobe enough money already. Thank you very much. And then they decided to make it free, and I think that might be because they noticed that people were busy using InVision or one of the numerous competitors, and they want to make a claim in this space. And from what I read about, people's comments on it, is that, Adobe has a lot of people on their enterprise platform that, we don't hear as much about as the kind of consumer products that most of us use, for whom Magento, which if anybody has not heard of Magento is an e-commerce platform. And certainly before the days of WooCommerce, it was much more popular for people who were making online stores. It currently does not have a huge part of the market, but if that part of the market is mainly big enterprises, the way it is for, say, Drupal, that could still be something worthwhile for them to have and to incorporate.
It does seem a bit, I'm going to throw it over to Chris in a second, but it does seem a little bit of a trend, because last week, or the week before, I can't remember, we talked about Square buying, I forgot who they bought actually. They bought a platform out for e-commerce, and I've noticed that they're advertising quite strongly that platform. What do you think this is a trend we're seeing here, Chris?
I think this is a trend ever since corporations started forming and acquisitions started happening. I think where we have to be careful is when a major brand acquires a bunch of tools to kind of dominate an industry. There's always a tension between the all-in-one solution and the best in breed. And in Jim Collins' great book, Good to Great, the number one reason a lot of great businesses fail is they do something called a line extension, where they take what they were doing and doing well at and working hard on, and all of a sudden the entrepreneur or the business owner or somebody gets shiny object syndrome and they bring in this other thing. And sometimes that works. A lot of times it doesn't. That's the fracture. That's the crack in the dam, sometimes on focus. So the big question is will this be a good acquisition, or is this, or are we going to take, I don't even think necessarily that Magento is like best in breed. I really like WooCommerce. I like Shopify as a hosted solution, but time will tell. So, some companies like, let's say Infusionsoft, if we look at email marketing and marketing automation, they got into the e-commerce space. They have their own way of checking out, their own e-commerce system. They even developed their own payments thing. And
it's just as appalling as everything else they do.
And to what a lot of people, the beauty and the brilliance of Infusionsoft was email marketing and the campaign builder. But now they brought in e-commerce, because a lot of people want to get into e-commerce because when their customer makes money, they make money. It's like a very direct B2B relationship, business to business relationship thing. But I hope it works out for them. I'd prefer Adobe to stay focused on the creativity and the art, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I understand it in some ways, but in some ways, the Square, I understood a little bit more actually, because in some ways I could understand it. But there's what do you reckon, John?
A lot of people feel that Adobe is buying Magento so they can make it a monthly subscription service, which would make sense because that's what they've done with everything in Creative Cloud. So that might be the direction that they're going. They might see it as a revenue generator. So WordPress.com better hurry up with getting WooCommerce rolled into that, because I'm sure that all the big players are really looking at how do we deliver like all-in-one strategy. Look at Squarespace. They have sites and e-commerce and for a monthly fee. Shopify, same thing. To be fair, I think Adobe is buying this more to compete with something like Shopify than it is to compete directly with something like WordPress and WooCommerce. But I have a feeling that their goal is to make it a monthly subscription service.
Yeah, I think you're totally spot on there. Thanks for that. I think we'll go for our break, folks, and we'll come back. We've got some great other stories, and we've got a great panel for this holiday weekend. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We've had a good discussion. Well, I think we've had some excellent advice from the panel. Not from me, but from the panel. Let's go to our next story. I kind of chose this. I don't normally choose these type of stories, but it's from a friend of the show, and he's been on the show, and Robert, and he's a pretty square shooter, Robert, is well, I think he is. Why we switched from selling our WordPress plugin from EDD, Easy Digital Downloads, to freemium. Anybody want to start with this one? Please. What about you, John? Go on.
I'm reading it right now.
All right, go on. Somebody rescue me here.
Well, I did read it, and basically what they said was that Freemius gave them a much easier experience as their plugin was scaling, because they handle the value-added tax and a lot of other things that EDD doesn't take care of, because that's not really what EDD is built for.
Can I just slightly interrupt you there? I just want to give you an insight why I chose this story, Sally, because you might be to the rest of the panel. Obviously, he was seeing the merits of freemium, but he was also discussing add-ons from third party, how they work. And I'm not just choosing easy digital downloads. I'd like to broaden the discussion about this whole subject, because add-ons, especially third-party add-ons, they're an interesting concept, and they've helped various plugins. And Chris, I'll be interested to hear what's Chris' thoughts about this. But let's take an example: Easy Digital Downloads, and third-party plugins have helped grow that product, and then they also have helped other products grow. They add additional functionality. They publicize the core product. It some ways mimics the success of WordPress itself. But yes, there can also be consequences, can't there, as well? That's why I thought it was reasonably interesting.
Well, yes, I mean that add-on model. I mean, WooCommerce uses it. Free core product, pay for various add-ons. Lifter LMS uses it. Ninja Forms. So it's it is a common model, and it works for a lot of people. From the developer standpoint, it can be easier and more cost-effective if what you're buying has a "this is everything" package. And then you have access to all of the things to use for your clients. So it's one of the reasons why the developer package for Gravity Forms is much more affordable than than trying to buy everything for Ninja Forms. But for individual end users, it means you don't have to run more software than you need, and you don't have to it's like, well, yeah, but you probably only need one or two of the add-ons, and so it's not terribly expensive to pay for. And if it's for a store, you should be willing to pay for something because you're trying to make money from it.
Right. What did you think of this? Have you finished reading, John, or do you?
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a couple of reasons. For one, it sounds like Freemius is a more robust, all-in-one solution for what Robert's looking for, because it handles VAT tax out of the box. It has some default drip campaigns and abandoned cart emails that are in there. But there's a couple different things. Like before, he was having problems with one of the third-party extensions that would export stuff to his accounting, but it would always get the the VAT stuff wrong. But with Freemius, it people can purchase like an upgrade directly from their WordPress.
Can you see why I put this article in, though, John?
I can, but
why I listened to Robert, because I normally wouldn't be influenced, but I know Robert reasonably well, and I think I've got a good idea of his personality. I don't think.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I mean, he's a good guy. Like I know Robert, and the other thing too is like the really important thing that I think that gets lost, like in the WordPress economy, like a lot, and how a lot of these things, happen, is one of the first things he says is, they're not paying me to do this or whatever, but it's because we started talking with each other in 2015, and we showed a genuine interest in each other's business. And then later toward the bottom of the article too, he says, you know, they're a genuine business partner. They're not just like trying to sell them stuff, but that, you know, it's at the end of the day, this is really like, you know, people, like talking with people. And whether you're selling a product or whether you're selling client services, you have to take a genuine interest in the business of the people that you're working with.
Yes.
Then,
well, I mean, I would certainly say Pippin takes an interest in.
No, Pippin's a great guy too.
But yeah, I don't know about, you know, the folks who were making the third party plugin that they had the specific issue with.
Right. I don't know anything about that either. So
I don't know that much about Freemius. Do you know much about it, John or Sally?
I keep seeing more posts about it on the managedwp.org site. There's more and more people talking about, you know, and now we're making more money with Freemius. Basically, is kind of how it how it comes out. And so, you know, I was inclined to just feel automatically a little suspicious seeing this article, but it does not seem like it's.
No, I've had Robert on the.
You know, that this was their experience, and you know, your mileage may vary depending on what precisely you need.
Yeah, I've had Robert on the podcast, and he's been on the round table as well, and he wouldn't write an article just for the sake of it. These are.
Is that why you also picked the next story about fake reviews?
Well, that's at the bottom actually. I put something in the middle between that and that. Right. Chris? I just wanted. You know, it's probably been a debate that you've been having with Thomas and other people around allowing third-party plugins, the strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully you can see why I allowed this story in to this discussion. Got any thoughts about it? I'm sure you have.
I do. I could do a whole hour on this topic, but the main thing is in the WordPress ecosystem for the listener out there, there's plugins and themes. But that's not how business owners think. They think in terms of like tools, and then some are free, some are paid. So there's some terminology we have to get straight. The first is I refer to plugins like when I'm marketing as add-ons. And I have what's known as the freemium add-on model, which I didn't even know. Sally, what it was as I was creating it, until I was talking to James Laws from Ninja Forms, which Sally mentioned. And he's like, oh, you have the add-on model. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I do, which has the free front end. But anyway, so a lot of people have like a paid product and then paid add-ons. I have a free product with premium add-ons, and then I have bundles. But anyways, that's the business model. And that's also a strategy for growth by giving away as much as you can for free. Add-ons can be third-party integrations with like other software tools, or they can be advanced features, or they can be other benefits like premium support packages and things like that. So at the end of the day, if you're a business owner, I always recommend using as few tools made by as few companies as possible. But just like we were talking about before, LMS is not going to get in the business of payment processing. We're not going to try to compete with Stripe, which is best in breed. We're going to integrate with Stripe through an add-on. And same with email marketing. I mean, we're going to integrate with third-party email marketing. So there's what you have to watch out for is some companies just keep piling integrations and add-ons, and the list gets really long. I'd prefer to keep like a small list with super high quality, laser focused on solving the business problems that the people are coming to my plugin for in the first place. It's easy to go over the top with add-ons. And then like I hear it all the time where people look at a pricing page and like the features columns are like a mile high. And they're like, I don't know what this means. I'm out of here. Bye. So, but I wanted to throw it back to you, Jonathan. And perhaps your reason for putting that article in here, in case we missed something as a panel, like what were you thinking or wanting to spur conversation about?
Well, because it kind of highlighted, you know, because didn't Pippin Williams himself decide on one of his products? I thought it was easy digital downloads, but maybe it's one of his other that he actually approached the third-party add-on developers and brought them in-house he actually bought the plugins from them.
Several of them, at least. Yes, I
Several.
can't remember if it was the
Most of
full
them.
setup, but I know they wanted to transition that in house to make things
And he wrote a very
compatible.
long post, and he's an extremely logical individual. You know, anybody would be impressed with him in Williamson if they got any sense. He's extremely focused and logical individual, and he wrote a very extensive post on the reasons why he did that. It just kind of interests me because I also know Robert, and I know he's a straight talker, and he was just saying he was having problems not with the core product, but he was having problems with some of the third party. Basically, they didn't work. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't work.
I just want to say there's a lot of quality differences out there with third-party add-ons. If you look at the WooCommerce ecosystem, like super close to WooCommerce is the third-party add-on called WooSubscriptions made by Prosperous, a different company. But then you can go and just Google WooCommerce plugins and end up like all over the internet, free plugins, plugin marketplaces of varying quality. So I could see that as a business owner. Maybe I had a great experience with like WooCommerce and then WooSubscriptions, but then I tried this other WooCommerce plugin I found and had a terrible experience. And it's really hard for like the core company, like WooCommerce itself, to maintain quality standards in an open source community environment.
Yeah, you want to you need to bow out and maybe switch off your computer and come back in, Chris, because you're going a little bit silent on us, and that's normally caused by your USB mic because you've been doing a lot of talking, haven't you? So you're going a little bit silent on us and then coming back with your rich tones, Chris. So he'll be back, folks. But I thought you would want me to say that to Chris. Right, I think we go on to the next one, shall we? We go on to the next one. But it's interesting. I thought I'd bring it in, audience, because I thought it was an interesting discussion. I think it has turned out to be something we could discuss a bit further. Number 5, simple introduction to intrinsic web design. I think Sally's got a big train coming through, so I'm going to throw.
The train has passed.
Oh, thank God! Because I thought you'd be really interested because you've done some and also John would be interested in this.
Yes.
I just want to quickly say before you jump in, Sally, the actual article I didn't think much of, really, to be honest about it. I didn't think it was the greatest, but this whole business, the thing about it. It's getting the kind of, I'm struggling now. That it's a load of technologies, and we've managed to concoct something that actually works. But we need a more central, clarified, core number of tools. Was okay. A, what did you think of the article? And B, do you think there's anything?
Well, it's I saw the headline and I thought, oh God, it's another buzzword.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But I went and read the article, and I thought, oh, okay, so this is a term that somebody's come up in an attempt to describe basically what I'm already doing. Is that and the situation we've had, which goes back to various other things we've talked about, and I'm going to forget the name of it now, but there's a really great, it's available as an ebook or an audiobook, Resilient Web Design, that kind of talks about how the web was always supposed to be, flexible and the earliest days of the web, it was responsive because all you had was text. And then, we kept inventing these hacky things that kept, that wouldn't.
Well, the whole thing is built. Floats were never designed.
Well, right, I've been building websites since 1994. So yeah, first you had pretty much nothing. You could maybe float and align an image or center a title, and then people used frames. And then no, frames were bad. People used tables. And then tables are bad. People use floats. And so finally, we're actually getting something built in that's aimed at layout. And so, there are new CSS layout tools, and we hear about them. So yes, I did a talk about, Flexbox a couple of years ago in Sacramento.
It was very good, up to your normal higher standards, Sally.
And, and now we have CSS Grid, which is awesome because, you can create a responsive grid in like 3 lines of code. Without having to do much of anything, without having to write, it saves writing media queries, and it helps you, it's actually designed for laying things out. And so it is, it's great that these things are coming in. The browsers are starting to work with them, and we're going to be able to do stuff without all this, hacky things. So, whether we need a new term for it or not, and maybe we do because there's not that much. Although I have somewhere in here, I closed my email, but it's basically, I hear a lot of people just sort of referring to, CSS layout, which is pretty much what this is about.
So do you think, because some of the ideas that he expressed in the article I thought were quite good, but this actual title, and he quotes this lady that works for Firefox,
Jen Simmons.
Has she been really pushing this, or do you think
I've seen her do a lot of? She's got a like YouTube tutorial series about things like Flexbox and Grid and various sorts of things. So, I had not, and I read about this stuff all the time. I don't know if I had come across this term, so I think it's not being pushed as hard as it might, and we'll see if it takes. But
and I couldn't really work out what this term was. Was it?
The idea, but intrinsic means it's part of whatever the thing is. It's automatically part of it, and I understand why you would pick that, because the other stuff people have done, particularly the JavaScript layout stuff, is not built into CSS. Or frameworks like Bootstrap are not built into CSS. And these tools, Grid and Flexbox, and some of the other things that are coming in with columns and so on, are built into CSS. You don't need to add anything in order to make them work. And I think that is an important point. I think the first time I mentioned Flexbox, somebody in the Genesis Slack community that I'm pretty active in, somebody thought it was, a framework like Bootstrap, and you were going to have to be loading a whole bunch of extra code. And if it's already built into CSS, you don't have to add a whole bunch of extra code. And that is a really good thing. It's better for performance. It's better for avoiding conflicts. It's less confusing. So, whatever we choose to call it, whether it's just going to be described as CSS layout, which is, what it is and pretty descriptive, it is by now, because of all the, hacky workarounds that we've come up with, kind of revolutionary to be able to do this stuff without adding anything in.
Right. What did you think, John?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Jen Simmons, she's very much part of that A List Apart crowd.
Like Rachel Andrews.
Yeah. She's part of she's one of the pioneers and one of those people that's been helping push things forward for the whole rest of the web. She actually had a podcast for a while. I think it ran on the 5x5 network for a while. I think it runs on her own site now called The Web Ahead. I don't know if she's still active with that right now, but she's been very much an active part of the web standards community, and one of those people that pushes things forward for like all the rest of us. So intrinsic web design, the way that I understood it too, is it's instead of relying on, all these like things to shortcut, it's things that are built into your browsers automatically. So CSS Grid, Flexbox, all these, things that have up, various degrees of support, like CSS regions and shapes and columns and those things. These are the things that people have wanted CSS to be from the very beginning. This was the promise of CSS from the days of the CSS Zen Garden up until now. So yeah, it's definitely, maybe this term will catch on as a buzzword, but basically I think it's a good thing, because I'm the type of person that, if you can do it with the tools that are built into, browser support already without having to load like all these frameworks, and, to me, that's like a better way to go. So.
Yes, Zen. Yeah, that got me when I was an active front-end developer, not a dabbler I am now. That's what got me into it. Just a bit like you, really, John, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And probably Sally.
I came around at the right time.
Right. I'm not going to ask Chris to comment on this, because I think he's probably got absolutely no interest. Well, he leaves this to Thomas, probably. Yeah, he's nodding his head. On to the other story. Is it worth to post fake reviews about your business online? And I'm going to start with John, and then I'm going to bring Chris in. So what did you reckon about this one?
Yeah, so most of the time where you see this the most is where it's most rampant is on Google. And I see this like locally. I see this.
And just to interrupt, John, there is a lot of people doing this, isn't there?
Oh yeah, it's very intriguing. Like so for example, you'll be looking up a competitor business and and they'll have these positive these 5-star reviews, and something just doesn't quite seem right. When you look at like a bunch of these like over time, you can kind of like tell, like your spidey sense goes off when something's like not quite like right. And you'll notice sometimes that, for example, this person reviewed, let's say that they're selling like tile. They reviewed a tile company over here, and in this city, and in that city, and in that city. Or, one of the people. They
must have insane
how much
tales.
tile can anybody buy? Yes, it becomes pretty automatically suspicious.
Yeah, I think there's a cottage industry of people that pay off Google local guides, which is basically you upload photos and you give reviews and stuff like that. And because I see a lot of that too, where people are local guides and they, leaving reviews like all over the country. So either they're, traveling a lot, and or somebody's paying them off like underneath the table.
Well, it's a whole kind of black industry that just not only affects this. I was listening to This Week in Startups, and he was describing, because he recently published a book, and he had a couple of people approach him about getting into the top of the New York Times list.
Yeah.
And there's people going around and
there was a thing recently with a guy going around promising that he could get you to the top of the Apple podcast charts.
Who's his name? I need him.
And it just sounded so suspicious to me. And then I read more stories about, this is, out there. Somebody's, basically gaming the system. And I saw the title of this and I thought, is this like, a rhetorical question? Because no, it really isn't worth it. But it's widespread. It's widespread among Amazon book reviews.
Well, I think to be absolutely cynical about this, don't hire really crappy people at this.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, Google.
The effort of faking it well is probably greater than the effort of doing it honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be there, but when he was talking about, these 3 companies approached him, and they basically, this whole business about review, that they would buy like 10,000 books and it would get you in there. Oh my God, fathers! It really.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Chris? What do you reckon?
I was in my Facebook group this morning, and Every day I delete some spam and people report stuff. And there was somebody in there who was like, "Hey, everybody, let's like each other's Facebook page." So I think, and I immediately delete, block. I mean, it happens a lot actually. But the the book Influence by Robert Cialdini is a famous marketing book. There's like 7 things that create influence, which marketers want. And one of those is social proof. A review is, and especially these days, like on Amazon and, Yelp and everything, it's like very powerful. But it gets gamed all the time. You can go buy reviews on Fiverr for $5. People offer to do an honest review. There's a whole industry called like reputation management. Like, how do you do that? At the end of the day, the way I look at it, the best marketing is a good product, and just let people naturally talk about it. There's always going to be people trying to game the system, but my general advice is don't get too wrapped up in trying to manipulate the system, whether you're trying to do that with SEO, with social proof, or like with authority. Like we had a WP-Tonic episode where we were talking about thought leader or authority or something. Like all these like influence factors in Robert Cialdini book, you can do it the right way, or you can try to like game the system, and it's just not the way to go. So yeah, it's like fake news, but it's a real problem. I don't have a solution for it. It's a real problem.
It's at every tier. It's at the Fiverr tier. It's at the medium tier. It's local business getting their friends to give them Google reviews. Then there's whole companies that they're making really good money, and their whole business model is doing fake Google reviews. They have whole offshore teams at it.
Yeah.
Then you've got even the New York Times getting in, so you got your book and you can brag it's in the top 100. It's from Fiverr level up to New York 100 book level.
Or political campaigns. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's permeated, literally, and you don't hear much talked about it, so I thought I would throw it in because we have to talk a little bit more in another episode about it, because it's not an area that you hear a lot about, but it's endemic now, totally endemic. Right, I think we've covered a lot of territory in this show. Oh my God. I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to let the panel... panel, I'm going to start with Chris. How can people find out more about what you're up to and what you're doing online?
You can find me at lifterlms.com. Check it out if you're in the business of selling courses or coaching programs with courses. And also have a podcast for course creators. Just Google LMS Cast.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. I listen to it myself. Yep.
Everybody on this panel has been on it. Sally's and John's hasn't gone live yet, but
I was just looking because I thought, wait, that's been a long time. I wonder.
I know it's in the queue. It's in the queue. Sorry.
It's in the queue. Sally, how can people find out more about what you're up to online?
Well, you can find me at WPFangirl.com. And if you are not busy on Sunday afternoon and you're in the Bay Area, please come join us for the WordPress birthday party at Port Workspaces. If you go to the East Bay WordPress meetup, either the meetup page or to eastbaywp.com, you'll find all the details.
I would, Sally, but I'm going with some friends to Alco, to the Liberty Mountain, the Ruby Mountains, and they're probably going to get totally lost. There we go. But if I wasn't, I would have considered it. John, how can people get hold of you online and learn what you're up to and your knowledge, John?
So sure thing. The URL for my site, I just recently changed it. So the old URL, lockdowndesign.com, that still works. But the new URL is lockdownseo.com. On social, I'm Lockdown Design, still everywhere. That one was just, that was too problematic to change. But,
I bet it was.
There you go.
And if you want to find out more about WP-Tonic, go to the WP-Tonic website. We've got some great art posts. I'll be knocking them out and around how to market your membership site, different work video. I've been we've been knocking out some good content, folks. And if you really want to support the show, you know, Twitter out to our sponsors, Lifter LMS, Kinster. They're great companies that have chosen to sponsor WP-Tonic. I'm fussy about who I allow to sponsor the show. And they're two great companies. So Twitter out, so you say that you appreciate them sponsoring WP-Tonic, that'd be great. And I say it every week, and it really does help the show. I'm tempted to a bit of British ad lib here, but I'm gonna refrain from it. I say it every week. Giving us reviews on iTunes really does help the show. I don't care if you want to give me 1 star and say it's absolute crap, or give us 5 star. I don't care. I read them, and I will be reading some out next week. I say it, well, I am going to start doing it to encourage you to give us a review, whatever you want to say about the show. And we'll be back next week with a great panel. I've really enjoyed this week. Have a great holiday weekend, and we'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.